Hey, what's up, class? Right now, I want you to look at some examples of some of the outlines I got that were turned in, and I want to give you a couple specific tips for how to improve them. So, the first one we're going to take a look at is we're going to look at how to make a better hook, right? So, this is an example of a really solid one, right? In the words of James Truslow, the American dream, has been much more than that. It has been a dream of being able to grow to the fullest development as man and woman, unhampered by the barriers which had slowly been erected in older civilizations, unrepressed by social orders which had developed for the benefit of classes rather than for the simple human being of any and every class. Now, take a look at that's pretty lofty, right? Notice how like that quote, it kind of helps you define the American dream. It kind of sets the tone for what you want to get do. Quotes like this are a really good hook. They're probably the easiest way to do it. Notice how the quote's articulate. It gives you credibility as a speaker because you're borrowing someone else's credibility. And you can pick a quote that has a tone that you want, that you think will be persuasive to your audience, right? If we're talking about ideals, you don't want a tone that's, you know, talks about like that sounds base or it sounds low. Another one way to improve this, however, would be to add the affiliation. And the best way to do that is you just highlight the person's name, right click, click explore, and bam. You'll notice that it brings up the Wikipedia page. It'll bring up a ton of other stuff. Actually, if you guys haven't tried this yet, you can just click this little button right here and click the explore tool, and that will help you. It'll give you places to start. If your outline is specific enough, it'll have like stuff you've written in there. All right, so now that we've looked at a good hook, let's take a look at another one, right? If we look here, within a fair society, many believe that justice must be upheld before all else. Is that true? Now, notice how this student tried to say like many believe. And that's kind of like that bandwagon appeal, right? Like peer pressure. But the hook is really general and uses a rhetorical question. However, that rhetorical question asks, is that true? Right? When you ask the audience to decide if it's true, you actually weaken your position and you miss out on an opportunity to tell them what the truth is. Right? That's far more persuasive. So the hook in the first outline is superior in that way. Then if you take the second thing I want you to look at is this part with the definitions. Okay, you'll notice that this one, it doesn't have a definition, and there are sentence stems you could use. Um, and this, I can't tell if this person is the first or second speaker. This person, however, seems to be the first, and they've developed some arguments for the second speaker as well. So here, the American dream is the belief that anyone, regardless of where they were, so they give a clear definition for the American dream. The next step, right? They missed an opportunity here. The next thing they want to do is add a quick section that ties why this definition is important to the resolution, right? So you look at your resolution, you should vote for the resolution. The American, oh, you should vote for this is confusing. The student could rewrite this, but it's more than just making money. It's an ideal. And you can talk about how like an ideal doesn't die, it just changes. Therefore, you should vote against the resolution, right? You can argue that this we still have. Like this gives you a place to start and to say this is still happening, therefore it's not dead. If you don't do that here, then you miss an opportunity. Here you could say like, if by the end of the speech you believe that the American dream isn't dead, it's just different, then you have to vote against this resolution. Like this gives you an opportunity to say something. Whereas if you don't define your terms, you actually give up power. You give up the ability to do that. Now let's take a look at this claim. And this second outline has kind of missed an opportunity because they've misidentified a claim with proof, right? So notice how this claim here, it has, there is always someone usually being favored. It has here a pronoun that's really general. Someone could be anyone, probably one person. So this is saying there's one person being favored, but then they're going to talk about a group like systemic racism usually being favored. So you have then this qualifier, which like sounds kind of weak when you pair it with a vague pronoun. And it sounds like this speaker is falling into the trap that a lot of you guys fall in, where you're trying to say something that nobody can disagree with. And I want to tell you right now that that's bad writing. Okay, it's not good. In an argument, you have to say something that people will disagree with, but then you support it with evidence, right? So this claim, it's not super helpful, but look to this proof below. There is a deep-rooted systemic racism that prevents minorities from in society from having equal representation in court. Therefore, no justice for them. Now that is debatable. That's actually a fantastic argument for this resolution, right? That justice must be upheld before all else, or yeah, in a fair society, justice must be upheld. This is a good argument for saying it's not. However, notice here, this proof could be its own claim, and the speaker could do some research to demonstrate that one, systemic racism exists. Because while a lot of people believe that racism is both individual and systemic, um, there is disagreement about the very definition of racism here. That would be a helpful term to define in this claim. Then their impact, this would be a great thing to have here. You'll also notice that there's no actual evidence in here. This is all logic, but it's not really reasoning from everything. The speaker has assumed that the audience agrees with this, and I don't believe everybody in the room will, because this speaker's misidentified a vague claim and then wrote a specific claim, something debatable, but confused it for evidence. Let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at the second claim here, right? Or the first claim here. The American dream is not dead, but different. So let's look at what it was in the past, what it used to be, right? That's a specific claim. You don't see a lot of pronouns in here. And then notice here for this proof evidence, they've written out their speech, using the Great Depression and unemployment figures and looks like, yeah, mostly unemployment figures as evidence. And then they make another claim here that the American dream as a country pulled themselves up for the bootstraps and saw unemployment rates drop from 30% to 5% in 1942. The American dream wasn't becoming a millionaire, it was having a financially secure life. So here, they've further defined the American dream, right? The idea that here we have more. It's a difficult dream for the European upper class to adequately interpret. So now this speaker is distinguishing between like what we think of the American dream and what it actually was, using quotes um, from the book The Epic of America. Then the impact, we know now that it's the idea of hope shown through the Great Depression, and they connect their case study with their resolution. What they might want to do here, however, is they're going to want to, basically tell the audience why this claim is something that, like, basically remind your audience of why this relates to what they should vote for. So just that was a big part, but I just want to sum it up for what claims are. Claims should be specific. They should be debatable. If they are vague and unspecific, like you're trying to be right, like nobody can disagree with you, you're going to lose people because it's boring and bad. Now, let's take a look here. And this is a powerful tool this speaker didn't use and had an opportunity to. Notice the speaker said, we can see that the American dream doesn't retain the same meaning, but it changes, it flows through time. You could rewrite that as if, the American dream was true in 1930 and the world has changed drastically since the Great Depression, then maybe the American dream has just changed alongside of it. So you can use if-then statements, particularly if you had a strong first argument. Because what that would let the speaker do is do something like, since that thing I just said was like really credible and true, then this follows from it. So you're attaching your second claim to your first one. They could have written something like, if the American dream changes with the times, then it evolves, not dies. One case in point is the change in the American dream from the 30s to the 80s. So notice how this would summarize like what that claim is. It would attach it to the claim before that, and then it would introduce the audience so they know what they're going to hear about. It would telegraph a roadmap for the audience so it's easier to follow. On the flip side, The second outline, and this isn't a bad strategy, they have a separate argument that isn't connected to this. But if you take a look, the evidence they used is actually just a series of questions, right? The impact they have, the connection between their evidence and their argument is actually also just a series of questions. Um, and they sort of start like talking about, prison over other moral implications. But notice how those are all questions. If you just keep asking your audience questions, you're giving up all of your power as the speaker. You don't get to tell them what the answers are. Now, one strategy is to use these questions. This is a drafting tool, really, but if this ends up in your final, you're not going to be successful in your speech. One strategy is to use these questions as your research questions and delve into the research resources that I gave you. They're on slide 28, and they'll be linked in this slide, or they'll be linked on here as well. They're a good place to start. Questions are a solid place to start. Actually, it's where we always start with inquiry and research, but they're not a good place to end. This, however, is a good place to end. It's a good time. In conclusion, the American dream is not dead. It's good to end on reiterating your claim. Therefore, and then it's really good to tell the audience how to vote, right? You might say something like, change is not the same as death. Therefore, the American dream is not dead. It's just lived on. It's just evolved, whatever. You should vote negative, or you should vote against this resolution. Like, that's a strong ending. The speaker ended on kind of a mic drop line, the contrast between dead and lives. That's good writing. So just a quick review of like the things that you saw, these suggestions you should take away from this. Um, we saw a couple different hooks, a quote versus a series of kind of vaguer questions. Um, then the difference between having a definition and not having a definition. Definition is it gives away your strength, but if you have a definition, you have a lot more opportunities to connect later arguments to it. We talked about the difference between specific claims and powerful claims, and we also talked about using if and then in your second claim to kind of ride off the strength of the first one versus a vague claim, right? A claim that uses a lot of pronouns and uses some qualifiers, words like usually, typically, often, maybe, stuff like that. Those confuse the listener and they make the claim weaker. We also talked about like the ending and how it's important to link your argument back to the points you made in that summary. So what you should do now is you should take these ideas and you should implement that in your writing. Okay, you should implement this in your writing. You should do this. Um, and I hope you're successful with it. If you need additional help, shoot me a message on Google Chat. Thanks, guys.